challenges within your respective subject areas in light of COVID-19? And you can answer that first with John.
Yeah, thank you, V. Look, I think the biggest shift in light of COVID-19 has been the move to online. I mean, that's the main challenge that everybody has faced in the last 3 months. So, like, I think I was reading some research somewhere where I think it's 9% of academics would rather teach online than offline. So what the biggest shift has been, all of these people who probably wouldn't want to be teaching online have not only had to do it at very short notice, but also, and that really was more of a blend, that was taking an offline course and moving it to an online environment in a very short space of time. And I think from September onwards, the focus is very much going to be doing things fully online. So really planning and preparing a course that's going to run on an online format first, and maybe switching back to offline if the circumstances allow. So I think that's been the biggest challenge. It's really been about trying to gear up very quickly and learn a whole set of new skills that a lot of people maybe wouldn't have had heretofore.
Okay, great, thank you. And Alex, same question?
I would definitely echo what John's saying. Move to online is definitely a really big shift, and I think it means that we've got to think about delivering in very different ways, which I guess we'll cover some of that as we go on further. But my impression from, I suppose, having worked in online learning for many years before I did a lot of face-to-face work, is that you need to put a lot more sort of scaffolding in place, and you need to plan things a lot more. What the COVID element has done is it has meant that we have to plan, but we also have to be agile, because we're in a very new environment. And from my own discipline, strategy, I think one of the things that's come out of COVID is actually people questioning the discipline as a whole. How can you take long-term approaches to business when you have these sort of dramatic changes? And it reminds me of the financial crisis in 2007 and 8, and how that had a seismic change on the way my subject was taught, or it should have done anyway. So I think we're going to see a similar thing with COVID-19. There will be a lot of people questioning whether we should be teaching business in the same way, or even the same sort of discipline-specific areas. From my personal point of view, I think strategy is even more important in uncertain times. But I would say that teaching strategy.
Okay, thank you so much. And the next question is, how has COVID-19 influenced student engagement? And Alex, you can go first on that one if you like.
Okay. Interesting, certainly in the UK, we got to the point where students were off home to revise for their exams. So the lockdown started just before the end of term, about 2 weeks before the end of term. So you wouldn't necessarily expect to see a huge amount of engagement from students as they're preparing for exams. However, I think certainly I saw was that students were very quick to request online resources. And initially that was quite conservative. That they were saying, well, we want some narrated PowerPoint slides. We'd quite like to have some sort of synchronous event on Teams or equivalent platforms, so that we can replicate what we think we're missing out on, because lockdown has meant the classes are cancelled. I think what's going to come out as we go forward is probably students getting more confident at saying, actually, there are lots of things out there which you guys should be using as academics, and I think that's going to be a big challenge for us. I know at my university we are about to appoint a whole raft of young people to help the academics navigate through this world, and actually to provide some I suppose customer advice. So listening to our customers, which I guess is probably what John as a marketer would be telling us to do. But anyway, that's my experience. So yeah, thanks.
No problem. John?
Yeah, just to follow up on that. Look, I think around student engagements is interesting because student engagement has been a challenge for many years, and an increasing challenge as students have, even in the classroom, access to technology and are frequently and easily going to switch their attention in a different direction, even in the classroom. So I think what we're seeing, and I do a lot of work with MBAs and execs, so that audience is also challenged to stay engaged because of pressures that might be going on at work, which can come into the classroom via their computers as well. So I think engagement has certainly been challenging in the last number of years, and will become even more challenging as we go forward, obviously, because we're going to get into a model which has going to have a lot more of asynchronous learning happening in it. And when you don't have, if you like, the discipline of the weekly class happening, then you're really going to, and I think Alex is right, I think we're going to have to look at an awful lot of the resources that are available to us, collate all of those and organize them in a fashion that will enable students to engage with the material. So, I mean, yeah, it's going to even be more challenging, but I think there is tremendous resources available to us, and I think it will probably broaden the range of materials that we bring to the classroom situation, virtual or otherwise. And I think in order to improve engagement, I think we're going to probably be much more planned and orchestrated about how we run our program. There's good and bad in that, particularly at a very senior level, because one of the good things about working with senior executives was a lot of the learning actually emerged organically in the classroom, and it's going to be quite difficult to achieve that, I think, in an online environment where you simply have to have things more organized and more orchestrated.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Okay, thank you, guys. And then the next question is, how do you think teaching using case studies is going to change considering COVID-19?
Yeah, I think, and that probably kind of speaks a little bit to my last point as well, because case studies were a wonderful vehicle for learnings to emerge in a classroom type of environment. And we are going to struggle, I think, to do some of that. I think particularly if the classes are large. I honestly believe if the classes are relatively small, as in kind of under 30, and you're dealing with a professional audience, I think you can actually use case studies still very, very effectively with that number of students, particularly in a live session. I think you can have groups going into breakout rooms, you can have them reporting back, you can do a lot of the things that we would do in the offline environment. I think people who have experience, and maybe Alex has more experience with this, having done a lot of online teaching, who have used cases online, tend to favor shorter cases and tend to favor cases that maybe don't get into the levels of complexity that more traditional offline case did. But look, I think certainly in subjects like strategy and marketing, case studies are so central to what we do. They're not going to go away. I think we just, again, like everything we do, we're going to have to probably rethink it a little bit and be a little bit more innovative and clever about how we use them, and maybe script them a little bit more, which is not desirable, but it's probably the only way to make it happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. I think with smaller groups, you can definitely have that synchronous online element. But my view, I think there are two elements really that are important here. First of all, I think topicality. The financial crisis meant that a lot of traditional older cases were out of date quite quickly. I think COVID is going to do the same, but by the same token, we don't want to be obsessed with the COVID crisis and have that as a dominant theme in every case you teach, because you're trying to sort of teach a lot of different things using those cases. I think the other thing is, as John said, it's going to be more scripted, probably more supported. There's going to be more scaffolding, but there's an opportunity to use a lot more multimedia and to actually roll out a case, perhaps a longer case, in more complicated environments, over time and perhaps take 2 or 3 weeks for students to explore that case and answer questions and discuss aspects of the case over a longer period of time, perhaps asynchronously. I think that's probably how it's going to look. But I'd be interested to hear from the attendees what they think, what they're going to look for in cases going forward. Because as John said, that's kind of central. And I think, we're all finding our way. So what do you guys think? What cases, what should cases look like in your classroom in future? What are you going to be looking for as the new term starts and going forward?
Yeah, I think Alex, that issue of topicality is spot on, because I've been working on some writing over the summer, and 2 of the cases that I was spending a lot of time on were both in the airline industry. And I mean, what aviation is going to look like in a couple of years from now, who knows? So we've really got to think about that. And yes, of course, principles will always remain, but topic taking account of all of the stuff that's happened in the last 3 or 4 months will be central.
Yeah, I did one on Booking.com, so similar thing. But by the same token, just finished one on Shiseido, the Japanese cosmetics company, and actually they're coming back really strongly. So who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you guys. Some really interesting insights there, and we're getting some lovely engagement from our audience. I've got a couple of questions and comments, which hopefully I'll read out once we're done with these questions as well. So my next question for you guys is, what are your observations of teachers moving online, given the current circumstances?
I'll start on this. I'll be quite quick. Lots of enthusiasm. My colleagues all seem very keen to learn more about online tools and techniques, but also quite a lot of trepidation. And I think really anxiety about tackling a lot of areas which are unfamiliar. My advice to anybody would be, there's loads of support out there, but be really careful where you actually pick up that support, because while there's some really great resources out there, there's also some stuff which is not so good. So choose carefully.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, I think one of the things as teachers perhaps we need to bear in mind is that we're going to be looking, I think, at a world that's going to be more concerned about learning rather than teaching. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that all of people who are moving online for the first time really need to start thinking about a lot more carefully, is that it isn't necessarily just about content, but it's about how the students learn. And that I think would be the challenge for a lot of, very skilled offline teachers, is to kind of shift their thinking to emphasize even more than they already do the issue of how do the students learn.
Okay, thank you guys. And then the next question is, what will assessments look like in your respective subject areas in light of the new normal?
Yeah, I think if we take marketing, I think in some instances they won't necessarily change that much. So if we take the large classes, which would traditionally maybe have used multiple choice tests and stuff like that, I think that will continue. Areas where I see some real challenges, for example, would be in the more advanced courses where we typically would use things like live projects with our students, where we get them to develop real marketing plans for organizations. I can see that being much more challenging in this environment, much more challenging to get the contact with the organizations and to have the students work in teams in the way that they traditionally would have. So I think it will force us to go back and have a look at the learning objectives and what we're trying to achieve and what is the most effective way to assess them. And I think one other thing, in part, and going back to the student engagement issue, will be, I think that the assessments will be much more spread out during the module or during the course rather than being located towards the end.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. I think group work is going to be one of the issues that we really have to tackle, because business schools do a lot of group work and employers like group work as an output. I think there are two things. There's going to be a lot more open book, and I think there's going to be a lot more emphasis on authentic assignments. challenging though they may be, I think they're going to be very important. I spent a lot of time working with students on wikis, and I think that the wikis are likely to make a comeback for group work, because what you've got there is you've not just got a product, you've also got the process. And I think assessing the process of groups working together is also an option. So in some ways, online assessment actually gives us a lot more options. I think that a lot of the closed book exam elements, maybe they have seen their day, and maybe that's a good thing.
Okay, thank you. And just a couple more from me. So what are some of the obstacles instructors may face within marketing and management in September with the new COVID rules?
Oh, balancing alignment and agility, I think. Having, as John said, the plans in advance and getting all your materials up and ready before term starts, but also the flexibility if things don't go as planned. If you have a debate on an online forum and nobody's posting anything, what do you do then? Well, we need a certain amount of agility to be able to be flexible. Probably that'll mean a lot more asking the students and a much better dialogue with the students, I would suggest.
Yeah, I think one that's perhaps a little bit outside our control, but I think it'll be real, is the quality of the learning management systems that are available to lots of students. Because we can be as clever as we wish in terms of how we do things, but if the user experience when they go online is really poor or is ineffective in different ways, I think that's going to be a real issue. So I think given that lots of universities are only getting up to speed on this now and improving their learning management systems, I can see some issues happening there.
Okay, thank you so much, guys. And last one from me, and then we'll go to some audience questions as well. So what has been the overall impact of COVID-19 on the marketing area versus the world of business?
Well, I think, should we just do a plug for the next book, Fee?
Might as well.
Yeah, because I think we're starting to see all of those effects. I mean, like the most obvious one, I guess, in the area of consumer marketing certainly is the enforced shift to online shopping. So lots and lots of people were already doing lots of things online, but this has just moved that on in huge leaps and bounds. So we now have a huge challenge for offline businesses. We have a lot of consumers who might have had preferences for offline businesses who have been actually forced to switch their behaviors. So the world of marketing is, a lot of it is going to stay the same, but there are significant changes, I think, in the whole area of retail that are really profound.
I think in strategy, it's much more going to be about implementation. If you think about sort of structure, systems, processes, people and culture, managing those remotely as people are much less involved in say, office politics and being in a particular location at a particular time is going to change quite dramatically. And I think from that point of view, putting strategy into action is going to be a very different process. Not least of which be because people will be working from home for quite a bit longer, I suspect, and many will not want to come back to the office, having experienced, the liberation of working from home. Other people will be only too desperate to get back, but I think it's going to be a fundamental change in strategy implementation.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for answering my questions, and thank you so much to our wonderful audience for contributing so many questions to this session. I'm just going to go through a few of them, but maybe we'll save some till the end of the session as well, but we will make sure we answer all of these questions for you. So firstly, from Keith, we have a question about how much investment should we as academics make if the only online courses will run during this time?
Can you repeat the question, Lee? I just didn't quite catch it.
Sorry, yes. So how much investment should we as academics make if only online courses will run at one time?
Yeah, if I interpreted the question correctly, we've got to make the investment because we don't know how long more we're actually going to be teaching courses online, and it could be a significant period of time, actually. And again, to go back to kind of Alex's comment earlier about people working from home, I think a lot of the universities will use this as an opportunity to offer more online courses. And so therefore, I think as academics, we're likely to be doing a lot more online engagement as we go forward. So I don't see a once-off investment that might be dismissed in a semester's time or a year's time.
I think the scaffolding that you put in place for online is going to be very useful even when you go back offline, because it will give you a lot of material to help students navigate through the course when you go back face to face. So I think the investment is well worth it. That would be certainly my experience. If you put that effort in and produce materials, they're always going to be useful, whether it's online or offline.
Okay, thank you. And then another question that we've had in from David. It would be interesting to know if teaching colleagues, have found that in general, engagement grows from level 4 to 6, but encouraging video usage among students has been challenging, most probably due to a number of reasons. Do you have any comments on that at all, guys?
Engagement increasing from sort of level 4 to level 6. With engaged students, yes, I would say that their engagement does increase, in my experience, from some sort of first year undergraduate to final year undergraduate. With those that are less engaged, it tends to stay about the same. Perhaps the engagement comes at the 11th hour when they suddenly realise they've got finals exams and they need to actually pull a rabbit out of the hat to get their 2-1 or whatever it is they need to get their graduate job. But yeah, so broadly speaking, with engaged students for sure. With those that aren't very engaged, I don't think it changes.
Yeah, probably concur with that, Fahy.
Okay, fantastic. And then a couple of questions I've got here from Olga. So just saying thank you very much for your insights. Another question for you. What do you expect in the near and far future in terms of teaching methods in light of the situation?
Yeah. I think as we were saying, I think it's going to be a lot more structured in terms of how we teach. And Alex used the word scaffolding there a few times, and I think that's going to be a big part of what we do. Thinking much more in terms of multimedia and thinking much more in terms of learning. And I think one other thing to look at as this develops as well is that we see ourselves maybe less as somebody who comes in and gives a class and goes away again, as creating much more of a kind of a student community and trying to engage a community of learners around a particular topic area. So we're in touch with them a lot more often. I mean, one of the interesting things, again, and Alex would probably know this more, having done a lot of online teaching, is that our levels of interaction with our students will grow on a more daily basis than they traditionally would. And I think that's something that we're really going to see, we're going to have to do. And I think it will create a different kind of learning experience.
Yeah, keeping an online presence, totally agree. And I think the other thing is we're going to go down the route of having a lot more bite-sized pieces of learning, and things are going to be chunked a lot more. Rocking up and doing a 2-hour lecture was probably not that good a way of imparting knowledge anyway. So maybe this is an opportunity to kind of really look at moving away, as John said, from teaching to learning, and getting that learning into the right size of learning opportunity that students retain and really do get the maximum benefit from that learning.
Okay, great. And I think Olga had another follow-up question. So do you guys have any suggestions on how to improve the dialogue with students despite the distance due to online teaching?
Oh, improving the dialogue. I think there are two things. It depends where that dialogue is. If you're talking about, say, for example, forums, presence is important, but also knowing when to stay silent. It's a bit like you might in a face-to-face classroom. There are times when it becomes very easy, say, in a tutorial session, to end up dominating because you've got the knowledge and you don't feel things are happening. I think sometimes students need a little bit of space to kind of engage and get going, so they stop being lurkers, as it were, online and actually start being participants. But by the same token, it's also knowing when to intervene and when to sort of push things forward. I've always tried to resist making stuff compulsory by putting marks in for engagement through sort of things like forums, but sometimes you have to do that, and I think that's another option to think about. Actually, make the process part of the assessment, which can also encourage more engagement.
I think actually asking the students what's working and what's not working is going to be a really important part of this as well, because in the offline classroom, you can tell so much from the body language of a group that they're engaged or not. You can't do that obviously online. So I think there's going to have to, I think teachers and educators are going to have to invest more time in really trying to understand where their heads are, and what are the kinds of things that are working for them, what's not working for them, and obviously adapt accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an example of that I came across. You come across the Minerva project. It's a San Francisco startup. And one of the things they did was, after every session, a bit like John was saying, the students got to evaluate the tutor for the session, and the tutor also got to evaluate the students and their engagement. So you had this sort of 360-degree assessment after every session, every synchronous session. Okay, that may be an extreme example, but yeah, absolutely agree with John.
Yeah, but I think in one's first online course, that's a sensible thing to do, because there's a lot of learning on both sides actually required.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take one more question right now, and then we'll save some more questions for the end of the session as well. So one question from Paolo is that, do you see a potential for more simulation games for group work to be used, especially as it provides the skill for group and remote working? Now, I know, Alex, you may be more experienced in our simulation games, but John, feel free to comment as well.
Well, I'm going to be doing that in October with my new group of master's students. I'll be using the business strategy game as the fully online version. So the meetings will take place online, the interactions will take place online, and it'll be interesting to see how that works. Now, I was actually recommended that by a friend of mine who's at the University of Winnipeg, and she had used it with e-learning classes for several years before, and said, it's great, you should try it with yours. I did, and actually that year I won 2 teaching awards from those students. They were so excited about it. So yeah, I think there's going to be a lot more of it. I think it can work extremely well online. But again, you have to put the prep and scaffolding in, and get them infused online rather than just in a kind of a prep class, which is what I've tended to do in the past. So yeah, very interested in that, and I think there will be a lot more of that. A lot of these simulations are geared up for online use. So
yeah, I fully agree with that.
Thank you very much, guys. So now I'm going to hand over to Geeta and Wes, who are going to take us through how Connect can work with marketing and management. So thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, everybody, and hi, everyone, from not so sunny Maidenhead. It's a bit cloudy here today. It's lovely to be here, and it's nice to be having this conversation. So I'm going to pass over to Wes first to do a brief introduction of himself.
Well, welcome, everyone. Nice to be here. Great topic. And thanks to Alex and John for quite a lot of insightful comments that have been made around COVID. I think it's really interesting times for everyone. But it's not so sunny South Africa at the moment here. It's quite cold. But otherwise, we're all safe and healthy. A little bit of background for me. I am a lecturer at the University of Pretoria. My focus areas are actually strategy, with more of a particular focus on, on business rescue and turnaround, and as well as business analytics. So I've used Connect for the last couple of years and had great success with it, and including this year as well. So I'd like to share some of my insights and experiences with Connect. They might differ with everyone else's, but I think, I'll give you some of the highlights and lowlights of our experiences here at the University of Pretoria.
Great, thanks, Wes. And I'm Geeta, as I just mentioned. So I kind of play two roles here. I think V very cleverly described me as a Connect expert. So I'm here almost as a little bit of a McGraw Hill expert, but also having worked in marketing and having worked in marketing for about 10 years, I'm hoping to provide a little bit of, I guess, industry insight on how some of the tools really help with preparing for a marketing course. So before we get going, one of the tools that Wes just mentioned is a tool we called Connect. And Connect is one of our core higher education platforms that you can use to transition your course from being either a hybrid course that you might be already doing blended learning with to being fully online. And there's lots of text here, so I'm going to attempt to sum it up really quickly. So it's a learning management system which features content, so that's adaptive reading content, so a wonderful textbooks that John and Alex have both published. They are available in an adaptive online format that sits within Connect that you can assign these readings to your students. We then have really nice, rich multimedia content, which again, the guys have been talking about and we'll talk through in a bit more detail. But that, again, is also available for you to assign and configure and personalize for your students. And what's really important to note is that it can plug in to all known learning management systems that you will use. So when you think of D2L, Canvas, Moodle, Blackboard, there is the ability to have single sign-on to our Connect platform. And of course, you get lots of reporting about how your students are engaging and interacting with the platform itself. So that's Connect in a nutshell, and we're more than happy to tell you a little bit more about how you can get started if you'd like to, but we're now going to look into some of the tools that are available within Connect. Next slide. So I've got an example here of what a typical Connect course looks like, and representing my marketing hat, I have a marketing course here, which we developed with one of our customers. And Alex mentioned scaffolding, and that's a really key part of what we do with our academics who want to use Connect. So we help them build their content week by week for their students, because you can imagine if you give all your students lots of content, they probably get a little bit scared at the start of term. So we help build our resources with our customers. And this is just an example of a fully ready-made course that a lecturer has built, which has reading in it, some video exercises, some case studies, but also some simulation. And the great thing with the system, in Alex's words, is very much the fact that you can be quite agile and very flexible with how you pull all of this together to suit your course type as well. Within Connect itself, we've got various exercise types, and really in my head, and I think in all of yours it will be, so for marketing and management courses, typically the focus is less around, like in accounting and finance, it's about the numbers and questions. It's more about application of concepts and getting students to understand the concepts, but then be able to apply it in that engaging environment. And within Connect, we've got lots of different types of assignments or exercise types which do pull in case studies. So we've got all the case studies that are available in our books, available in an online format that you can assign to students with questions. There are test bank questions, so if you are still doing MCQ ways of assessing your students, or you need to do a quick quiz, we've got banks and banks of questions that are available within the platform itself. And of course videos, and we know students love video. They engage better with watching a few videos and then answering questions to see both marketing and management in the real world. So those are also available. And again, it's up to a lecturer to decide how much of that content they want to give to their students each week. So a quick question, I guess, Wes, for you, like which exercise types do you see yourself using most on your course at the moment from a management perspective?
Okay, well, I think by far the most is the SmartBook function. I absolutely love that function and I use it a lot, as well as the quizzes to do a number of testing. So those are the two major features that I use.
Perfect, thank you. And that's a very nice segue to our next slide, which is to talk about SmartBook. So SmartBook itself and Notice 2.0, because we launched a new version of it last year, is essentially our adaptive reading and learning environment. It's an adaptive form of, the textbooks that we all know. You can obviously get an ebook, but we've taken that sort of a step further to get students really engaged with the reading process and the learning. As John mentioned, we're in a business of where we want students to really learn the content, learn the topics, and also be in charge of their learning too. So the way in which it works is that a lecturer will decide what content they want the students to read, and then students will work through that content with some practice questions. So you'll see there's a little practice function here to assess how much they understand about a topic, and then they'll be going into reading to make sure they truly master that content. So that's a big part of what we offer. And within marketing, why that's really useful is because there is quite a lot to know in a marketing course in terms of concepts. And I know this through studying it myself, that there are lots of topics to get your head around, and then students are very quickly expected to then apply that through a case study if they haven't done marketing before. So how SmartBook really helps those students is it helps them with the fundamentals, that then helps them apply when they come to do a case study, or if they're going to be doing some kind of application exercise, that they can at least master the concepts and be able to master it at their own pace, given that it's quite adaptive in its nature. And we've got typically lots of really good feedback from students, and particularly from students who spend a lot of time in SmartBook. A lecturer can say you spend half an hour, and very often than not we find students will be spending an hour because they're spending time actually getting to grips with the content. And within SmartBook there's not just the reading, but there's also the feedback. So an instructor, and you can see I'm the instructor here, can actually see how long my students have taken, how much time they've taken, what items they might need to refresh on, but also be able, and a student can see the same sort of feedback too as well. And I think Wes, you've had good usage actually of SmartBook on your course at the moment. So I think the next one is actually your experience of it. So I'm going to pass over to you.
Okay, great. Like I said, SmartBook is a brilliant feature. We've been using it a lot over the last couple of years. One of the big bonus features of it is the fact that we use it to get the students to engage in the content early on in the semester. So a big problem is trying to get students to open up the book when you start the course and just start reading through some of the content so they can get their head around certain concepts. And hopefully then at a later stage, they start asking the real tough questions later on the semester, which as lecturers, we would like to help them with before their exams. What SmartBook really does well is it gets them to open up these books, force them through the content at an early stage, and then both enhance the in-class engagement as well as get them through the content in a progressive way before the exam. A nice thing that I think Geeta hasn't emphasized enough is the fact that you can customize every aspect of SmartBook. I mean, it's really easy to customize a lot of the content and the way SmartBook operates in a course from an instructor's perspective. But if there's anything else, the McGraw team has got the in-house capabilities to do that and do it fairly quickly. So that's a big bonus as well. What we found is that initially when we started using Connect, we put too much, the task of going through the SmartBooks were too lengthy, and the students were feeling a bit frustrated doing all these tasks. So we had to narrow those time bands down and they started enjoying it a lot more. I think also the Read Anywhere app, going offline, is also a key feature of SmartBook. What we also tend to find is that some students don't have as good access to the internet as others. So having an offline feature for the SmartBook has helped us a lot to make sure that everyone accesses the content equally. With regards to the slide that you're seeing now in terms of discovering missed questions, this has helped me a lot in terms of compiling the exams. With management subjects, the way you ask questions is kind of quite critical. I find that students, especially if they take a subject like strategy and they're still in the undergrad, they struggle initially with how to answer certain questions rather than the content itself. They've read through the content, but they struggle with actual questions. They tend to feel that they're a bit vague and they're a bit unconfident answering them. So getting this sort of feedback from SmartBook beforehand helps us practice on certain questions and work through them in class. We can go to the next slide, which deals with finding gaps in metacognition. With regards to the other areas of analytics that SmartBook gives, it gives fairly high-level analytics that helps us enhance in-class activities as well as exams and helping at-risk students. Over the years, if you've taught a subject, and I'm sure everybody here is familiar with that, you get to pick up, if you can get early warning signals, you can address these issues fairly quickly because you know more or less what's going on. But there are those circumstances where you're not too sure why this particular group of students or a particular student is struggling, and you want that more deeper insight. And I think this aspect of the reporting of SmartBook and Connect to does help with that a lot more. It also acts as or serves as a purpose in terms of helping approach learning tasks, emphasizing appropriate skills to utilize, and so forth. The next point, or the next slide, is finding focus points in class. This is what I use a lot, is that what I'll do is I'll prescribe a particular chapter of a textbook on LearnSmart's book for the students to do before class. And then I'll review the statistics or the analytics beforehand, and I will use those analytics to customize what I focus on in class. Both it maximizes or optimizes the amount of what we do in class, but also makes it a lot more engaging. Some students go through sections as if it's a breeze, and then hit massive obstacles in other sections. And that's really where you want to focus. And that's where they listen as well. So that has helped us enhance our in-class activities a lot more. And then finally, in terms of identifying at-risk students, and I guess this is more relevant now than ever before, is, with us all doing huge amounts of online teaching, the chances of at-risk students falling through the gaps is increased substantially. So being able to identify those students, our one module has approximately 800 to 900 students in a semester, and the chance of students falling through and not being noticed if they're having issues before it's too late is quite high. What Connect has done is it's allowed us to address at-risk students far earlier in the semester and also understand why they're struggling, give us a bit more insight in that respect, rather than waiting for a particular semester test or an exam to tell us. So overall, I'm fairly impressed with Connect 2. I've used it for the last few years, and I'm fairly comfortable with it. I think it's a brilliant product, and with everyone moving across now, doing more online teaching, it's more relevant now than ever before. An earlier question that was targeted at John and Alex was, how relevant online teaching is, or how much should we invest in online teaching now? Well, a couple of years, in 2016, we had massive riots around our universities in South Africa, and they literally shut down the universities for a whole semester, and we were forced to jump into the deep end in terms of pushing all our courses online. And we made big investments into that. And now comes 2020, and all those investments are paying off. I firmly believe that this won't be the first crisis a lot of universities are going to be facing. Investing in this technology, investing in platforms like Connect2, just gives you the ability to adapt faster when in these sort of circumstances. And that's definitely helped us again now in 2020. Back to you, Geeta.
Cool, thank you, Wes, and really valid point. And just to really emphasise that sort of, you guys were doing this before in a hybrid teaching environment and then fully online, and now you're very well prepared to go online. So no, thank you for that insight, very helpful. And one other area we wanted to mention, and I think it was Paolo, I hope it was Paolo and I didn't get your name wrong, you mentioned the simulations and how important that's going to become. And definitely in a traditional marketing course or a management course, simulations have been around for years. And I can say that with quite a lot of credibility, I feel, because I've been working with academics for a long time. So simulations have always been there. And what we've tried to do is embed a lot of those simulations within our Connect platform for both marketing and for management as well. So this year we launched what we call application-based activities. So these are big simulation games that we've chopped up into smaller simulation games, and they're around key topic areas that a student can work through themselves within the online environment. Again, obviously they're academically rigorous and they are tied to key subject areas that we expect. So an example of what kind of list it looks like. So from a marketing end, you can practically find a simulation mini game based on every core topic area that you'd find in a typical marketing course. So for example, advertising, branding, consumer behavior, marketing research even. There are small simulation games that a student can work through themselves online in an environment. And the great thing, and I don't think I need to tell anyone this because you're all academics here, but it's that idea of applying the classroom concepts in a practical environment before they go to a place of work, and just to give them that hands-on insight. And actually Alex nodding, so I think I got that one right, which is good. And we also find this in most management disciplines as well, so strategic management being one of them, but also in other management areas such as organisational behaviour, leadership. So we've developed a whole suite of these kinds of games which are available, short snippets. You don't have to go outside and look for games to try and find ideas. All of them are already created and curated for you and available for your students to use as and when you wish. And of course, we can provide some guidelines around how you can embed that into your teaching. And of course, our wonderful authors are already doing this. So if you do need a bit more guidance around how to embed something like that in your course, then we can obviously offer some support as well. In terms of overall impact, so obviously I don't teach myself, so I'm going to pass over to Wes on what the overall impact has been from using Connect on your course.
From a student perspective, I think students just generally get to understand the coursework better because of the exposure earlier on and progressively throughout the semester. Also with the fact that we can pick up any issues, gaps in learning, at an earlier stage. So all this has done is enhanced the learning process, and overall that's improved our overall performance marks. Our students are performing better. We have measured the courses that we've been teaching for a number of years before and after Connect, and it definitely does enhance those marks, and hence why we've kept it. Then with regards to, Connect is a fairly professional way of delivering the course content. It's got a very stable platform. It works on most devices. We haven't had much issues with it as well. So it also helps us with our professional way of conducting ourselves with our students. And I think, that kind of sums it up.
Cool, thank you. And I mentioned this already, and I think there was a question actually about this in the chat already, but Connect can slot very neatly into all known LMSs. So whatever your LMS at your institution, we're able to slot it in quite nicely into your platform, so you don't have to be sending students outside of your online environments that you already have in your institution, and it's really easy for us to do. Now, very conscious of time, I'm going to quickly just talk about this. So when we were talking earlier about the challenges of online education now and what challenges it puts on an instructor, and we know that academics are a little bit anxious, and rightly so, because if you haven't taught in an online environment before, it can be really intimidating, can be really scary, because you might feel like your students are more au fait and comfortable with it than you feel. So we understand this, we recognise this, and it's been a challenge that I've seen at McGraw Hill for the past 10 years. So I just wanted to make you aware that we do have a field-based team. Obviously, they're not currently in the field because they're all currently at home, so, but they are available from academic consultants to digital implementation specialists, but also digital faculty consultants who are just like you. They use technology in their courses, and they can provide support around how you set up your course, integration with the LMS. They can even train on Connect, because we know that everyone's not going to get it straight away. We also help out with onboarding when students first join, with materials and resources, and we're there pretty much every step of your way. So if you are looking to use something like a Connect platform, then we're there at every single point of the course itself to help you have the best chance that you can at using the Connect platform successfully. So you're not alone, and we totally recognise the slight anxiety that does come with having to move everything online in the environment that we're in. So that's a thank you from us, and I think we're going to pass over to some questions. So back to you, V.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. That was really, really good. So we've had a few questions coming through, but I am mindful of time as well. So we'll try and get through some of these questions. This is a question, I think, for all of the panelists. So can we share 3 top tips? This is from Tony. Sorry, thank you, Tony, for your question. Can we share 3 top tips for successful virtual teaching and learning? What learners love and hate? So where's John, Alex? Feel free to chime in.
Okay, I'll have a go first. I think 3 top tips. First one. Manage your online presence very carefully. Know when to step back and when to step in, just like you would in a classroom. The kind of timing element's really important. That's a skill to develop. Be really clear about how long you're expecting students to take on a particular learning activity. That scaffolding, that element of letting people know what to expect is really important in terms of people managing their time and expectations online, and break things down into smaller chunks than you might do if we were thinking sort of in terms of classroom. I know in face-to-face classroom technique, you would tend to sort of say, well, okay, 15, 20-minute activities in a 2-hour lecture or a 1-hour tutorial. Break things down. You can't do the 2 hours, you can't do the 1 hour online. You need to break things down and have them, I suppose, more segmented so they make sense on their own, but they're also connected to the wider learning for a particular topic, say.
Maybe from my side, I'll just add that I've learned a lot over the last few years. Is first of all, the length of class, I think, is a big factor. I don't think we can have the 2 to 3 hour classes that we typically get away with in contact classes. Online is different in that respect. You have to keep it short and sweet. Analytics is key. I think we rely heavily on students. Being in a class, you can feed off the students' engagement, how they're interpreting stuff. That's a bit difficult when doing webinars or online teaching. So, your fallback is on analytics, and we need to be more comfortable with reading those analytics and collecting more data points. And then finally, something that's really thrown me off a lot is let your students lead in a lot of ideas. I've had a number of students move over to platforms and suggest ideas of engagement. They're quite familiar with new products and new technologies around, and they can assist us advancing the way we engage with them with online mediums. So it doesn't all have to come from lecturers. Your students can be a source of inspiration as well.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll go with one more question from Lucia. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Thank you for your question. So she's commenting that social interaction is a big part of teaching and learning and developing trust. John and Alex just mentioned that body language cannot easily be read. Are there any other tips apart from evaluation that Alex just mentioned in terms of developing trust?
Do you want me to pitch in again?
Yeah, feel free.
One of the things in terms of developing trust, particularly the beginning of a class, is online icebreakers. We often use kind of traditional icebreakers in classes. One of the things I found was really effective in building a community and building a certain amount of trust at the get-go would be to have some sort of icebreaker. Sometimes that can be a silly questionnaire that some people use things like Belbin or whatever. So, but you could use something more frivolous and less business-like than that. The one that I used was, what sort of business person would you be in the medieval world? And it just provided a talking point. It allowed people to do something that was a little bit off, I suppose, off target, but fun, and got a discussion going. You could comment on what they found, and it got a dialogue going. So that was one simple thing. I think the other thing in terms of trust online is that you are absolutely accountable, and you need to deliver what you say you're going to deliver, which is why I think it's so important to have everything ready and planned before the start of term. You can't really busk it, because trust can break down very quickly if stuff isn't delivered when you say it's going to be delivered. Lots of people will be building their whole lives around that delivery at a certain time, having those materials available and being able to do what they need to do around family life, around work, or whatever it is.
Okay, thank you very much. And now I'm mindful that we've gone 2 minutes over time. So if anyone does need to log off, no problem. We are recording this session. I will personally stay online for another 10 minutes to answer any questions that are still outstanding, if that's okay. And for those of you who are leaving, thank you so much. And please do stay connected with us on social media where possible. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And thank you so much for joining. But otherwise, I will go on and answer a couple more questions if the panelists are happy to stay on. So, an interesting question from Nave, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. How would the experts plan delivery of their core content in September? So I think this is a question for Alex, Wesley, or John, either of you.
Can you just repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. So it's just, how would experts plan delivery of their core content in September?
Okay, well, I can try and answer that from my side. Our new semester starts in July, so that's a bit closer. What we're doing is, what I'm doing is I'm planning worst case scenario, everything's still online, no hybrid teaching, going back to hybrid teaching yet. The big trick here is I'm taking a lot of, I've realized that I can't have my normal 3-hour classes with the students. So in the process, I'm going to anticipate doing 1-hour classes and then break up those other 2 hours with short videos and then embed that into the various online mediums that we have available to them that kind of go into various learning objectives in short videos. A lot more use of rubrics in order to allow students to interpret stuff in their own way. This reliance on strict memos. And obviously the students can collaborate a lot more in the background. So, we need to rely on in their interpretation. That's from my side.
Yeah, the difference for me, I'll be teaching an MBA course in the autumn, and that normally meets once a month for 3 days. And in the intervening periods, the students are pretty much left to their own devices. So what's going to change for me is I'm going to schedule work for every one of the 12 weeks rather than just the weeks that they would traditionally have been on campus. So yeah, so it's going to be much more scripted.
Fantastic, thank you. And then I think just one more question I'll take here from Eddie. Thank you for your question. How can I manage the feeling of having to talk to myself while using virtual teaching when I'm not reading body language as it is in face-to-face teaching? A funny one, but happy for you guys to answer.
It's a really good point, actually. I remember using a platform called Illuminate many years ago with the Open University, and it was supposed to be a sort of synchronous video tutorial that we did online, and students wouldn't turn their videos on, and all they did was type things into the chat box. It's kind of quite tough. It's kind of quite tough to do that because you do feel like you're talking to yourself. I think in some ways it's the same discipline that you do when you're blogging or you're using kind of doing videos of yourself. You kind of have to make friends with the camera. Imagine the camera is the student, as it were, or some people even put a picture of a group of students behind the camera to help them to kind of visualize. I don't know, whatever works for you, but I think there are different techniques and tools. But yeah, I totally recognize it as an issue. The other thing, I guess, is practice.
Yeah, I'd agree. There's no getting away from it. You just got to practice.
Also, maybe a suggestion is just to, Alex mentioned it earlier, is give marks for engaging. Students might be a bit more hesitant to engage on a web-based platform, but maybe this is when you have to incentivize it a bit more, so that they can jump in and ask a question to the rest of the class, which kind of gives you a break, and gives a bit more human interaction in there. I know that some platforms have a very neat feature where you can create breakaway rooms. So if you've got a very big class, you can split them all into groups of 3 for a few minutes to discuss a particular topic, and then back to you again, which is quite neat as well.
Yeah, the incentive thing, Wes, absolutely right. And one of the things that people do with this is sometimes, I'm sure I read somewhere about people using gamification for this, where you kind of build up certain stars in certain areas to get a profile. So there are all sorts of ways of kind of making it a bit more fun, I think. Obviously takes a bit of preparation and a bit of thinking. Sometimes it can actually work very well.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone, for answering those questions so efficiently. And thank you to our wonderful audience for staying on a little bit longer with these questions and answers for us. We will be sending around a recording to everyone, so please stay tuned for that. And we have some more webinars on the horizon next week. I believe we have a webinar coming up around labs. If anybody is interested, my colleague can drop the registration link in the chat box. And otherwise, thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you, wonderful speakers. Thank you.
Oh.
Hello.
Hello.
We're done.
We're done.
Well done,